Hello, and thanks so much for checking out our toolkit on how to host a door knock this summer or fall with MNIPL to help get out the vote. We're going to go over this toolkit and hopefully answer questions that you might have. But of course, if you have more, please email us at outreach@mnipl.org. We're not going to read this word for word or anything, just kind of give you an overview that hopefully helps this make more sense. But before we dive into this, I do want to show you on our MNIPL website where this document lives. So it's on our 2022 voter conversation campaign page. You can see everything that you need for the campaign here and how the goal of this campaign is to have nonpartisan, meaningful conversations about what's at stake this election and really making sure that people are ready to vote. Because in the midterms, we know that voter turnout is a lot lower than in presidential years. So as you can see, our three ways that you can take action with us is to knock on doors. We're gonna talk about that today. Show up in public spaces with tabling is another option. And then talking with people is the third. But let's dive back into our door knocking toolkit. So as you can see, you can jump to different parts of the toolkit right here in this little table of contents. And the first thing you're going to want to do if you want to host a door knock action is you need to let us know. So I'm going to click on this simple Google form. The reason why you need to fill this out, so you want to indicate door knocking and hopefully let us know when-ish you're planning to do this. Maybe you have a date in mind. Maybe you're like sometime in the fall. I don't really know when. The reason why you need to at least just let us know you're interested is because we at MNIPL are committed to helping you. Don't forget to submit. I just want to say, we're committed to facilitating the training for this door knocking action and also getting you the materials ready to go. So because you're going to need staff present, we need to be able to make sure staff can go, right? So this is kind of the key first step. And again, even if you're not sure what date you're going to do yet, just let us know that you're interested. And you can always drop by our weekly office hours that are virtual to ask questions, talk to us, and of course, email at outreach@mnipl.org. But first, what is door knocking? You might have heard about door knocking with a campaign or with a candidate. This is a little different. This is instead of getting trained with that candidate or party or whatever, you're going to meet at hopefully your faith community or some kind of central location where your group meets, most likely a faith community, but could be others. And then you're going to spread out in the neighborhood. So each person is going to knock every single door that they come across. That's different again than knocking for a party or a candidate because you target doors, you skip certain doors and you're really actually looking only for specific people. But here we want to talk with everyone. And the goal of these conversations is to talk about what matters most to our neighbors and connect that to voting. Make sure that they have a plan to vote. That's really critical, and build connections with our community. So how do we door knock? Like I said, it starts with a training that we MNIPL staff will lead. Then you will either break into pairs to walk around the neighborhood, or you can go by yourself. And then we'll regroup, we'll walk back to the faith community or wherever the central location is to debrief and close. And how long should a door knock last? You get to decide the answer to this question. Door knock shifts are ideally 3 to 4 hours long because that includes time for a training so everyone feels really set to go, and then for a debrief at the end. We want to give lots of spaciousness for that. And so, if the door knock's only 2 hours, you don't actually have a lot of time to talk to people. And when you're picking a time to door knock, it's really key to remember there's no perfect time of day or day of the week because, weekends and weeknights, maybe people are out of town or they're busy or they're out, putting their kids to bed. Weekdays can actually work pretty well because people might be working from home, but then at the same time, other people will be out during the day, during the week. So you really just have to pick a time and go with it. You can't do any time after 9 p.m. though. That's just too late. And we'd really recommend, again, if you're doing this with your faith community, maybe right before or after a worship gathering because people are already there. How many volunteers should door knock? Really, the more the merrier. We'd say 6 to 10 is a really great group size. If you have lower, that's okay too. Just know MNIPL staff can't commit to having a staff there if you have less than 3 people kind of planning to come. We can obviously make exceptions, but we'd really love for you to put in the work of making sure, that a pretty good group size is there. So at least 3 people. And when should I organize this door knock event? You can do this anytime before November 8th, which is election day, but early voter registration in Minnesota ends October 18th. So you might want to choose sometime before then, because then there's still time, to register voters online or with a piece of paper that you'll be able to use, basically a printed voter registration form. Also, National Voter Registration Day is on September 20th. So that could be kind of a fun day since people around the country are doing similar actions. So let's say you're interested, you want to do a door knock, you want to make this happen. That's awesome. We're going to talk through the steps to actually do that. So the first key steps you should do as soon as possible. So you should decide on a date, a time, and a location for this door knock. You want to give this a lot of time so you can get, make sure the materials are ready, make sure MNIPL staff can be there, recruit people, etc. And if you choose a location, a neighborhood where English is not the primary language, you can also go ahead and print voter registration materials in different languages. So just keep that in mind. A really key thing is to email outreach@mnipl.org to confirm that MNIPL staff can come. Otherwise, if you don't do that, you can still totally do a door knock, but we will not be able to be there to lead the training and support you. And then start recruiting volunteers. It's really great to start right away. And also, we have some tips for recruitment at the bottom of this document. So then a couple weeks out, 1 to 3, you want to do some preparing. So get door knock materials. We'll talk about details below. Most likely you won't have to do a lot of work here because MNIPL staff will bring most of the materials. And then also remind volunteers 1 week before and 2 days before the door knock. People are busy. Sometimes they don't write things down. Make sure you give them those reminders or they might not come. And then the day of the door knock, you want to send a final reminder email to volunteers. You want to show up early, hopefully 30 minutes early works for you because MNIPL staff needs to set up and just make sure that you've touched bases. Then you want to participate in the training. Pretty easy, right? You want to take a group photo before everybody goes off to door knock. That's because photos are really powerful and can tell your story later. And then just have a great time door knocking and talking to voters. At the end of the door knock, make sure that either we at MNIPL or you collect materials from volunteers, especially if there are any printed, voter registration forms or vote by mail request forms. And then after the door knock, turn in any, forms as soon as possible because we got to get those voter registration forms in. Most likely MNIPL staff can do this, but again, if we're not there, you're going to need to do that. Thank your volunteers. That's super critical, right? They took time out of their day. They did something a little scary. And maybe if you help them feel valued, they'll want to even do this again now that they're trained and feel confident. And then tell us how it went. Just fill out a quick feedback form that we'll send you just to let us know how it went. Are there any stories, any photos, any insights? We'd love to hear them. And then share your story. Pretty obvious, but maybe with your faith community, you could share during worship, share with your local paper. There are lots of ways to get the word out and share what you did. And then door knocking materials. So like I said, if MNIPL staff are confirmed to come, we will bring most of these things, but we'll go over what these are. So each volunteer should have a pen, a clipboard, and a name tag. And some optional but appreciated things for the group are a printed Google Maps kind of view of the neighborhood. You can also use your phone, but it's kind of nice to have a printed piece of paper so that we can maybe draw on it. We can write people's names like, okay, Carissa is going to go on this block. Water bottles are really great to provide snacks. The happier people are and the more they feel cared for, the more likely they are to come back maybe and do a second door knock. Sunblock, similar thing. And then I will vote stickers. You can order them for free from mnvotes.org. They're just kind of a fun thing as a bonus to have on your clipboard, but you don't have to have them. And then the things that we'll be printing and bringing, a volunteer sign-in sheet is first. That's definitely important. So we know who's there, right? So pretty simple, and also space for people to jot down any notes afterward, number of voters registered, that kind of stuff. And then for each volunteer's clipboard, there's some really key materials. The first thing I'm actually going to show you, I'm going to skip down, is a voter handout. We're going to want people to carry as many of these as possible, because these handouts, which we will cut in half, so they're kind of skinny pieces of paper, are what we're going to leave at every single door, whether they answer the door or not. And as you can see, these are pretty nonpartisan. They are just voter information materials. You can see they're double-sided. And a really key thing to see is that we're featuring a voter pledge where people can use their phones. They can scan this QR code with their phone's camera, and it takes them to a lovely voter pledge. And I'm going to take you there really quickly so you can see what this is. So by going to this page, people can fill out their information. They can tell how they're going to vote, maybe early in person or on election day or by mail. And the reason for pledging to vote is because the more someone thinks about their voting plan, the more likely they are to actually do it. And this allows us to also follow up with them closer to the election. Another really nice thing about this voter pledge page is it includes a lot of voter frequently asked questions. For example, how do I register to vote, or who's on my ballot? If they click on the link, it takes them directly to the Secretary of State's website to answer those questions. So that's why this voter handout is so important. We really recommend printing them on thicker cardstock if possible, totally fine if not. So now we're going to check out our door knocking script. This is the meat and potatoes kind of key piece of this all. And of course, with a script for door knocking, people are not going to read it word for word. It's not, anything where they need to have it memorized. It's just something we'll practice with, and hopefully people can use it as kind of a guide for when they talk to people at the doors. So I'm just going to go over the script really quick. I'm not going to read it word for word, but give you an idea of what the pieces are. So they're going to need to first introduce themselves, and they can either introduce themselves as being part of MNIPL or with their faith community, however you all decide you want to introduce yourselves, and saying, we're out here talking ahead of the November 8th election with our neighbors. Do you have a few minutes? If they say no, you can thank them and maybe give them the handout and leave, totally fine. But the first question is, when you think about voting, what issue matters to you the most? And try to have a conversation with them. You can ask, what about this issue makes it so important, and really try to understand. And a really key thing is, some people will say things we don't agree with, and we're doing this in a nonpartisan capacity. So we're not trying to tell people, you're bad or you're wrong, or I totally disagree and I need to convince you of why. But here's some things that you could do, because again, we're trying to just connect with our neighbors. We're trying to listen across divides in cases. So, ask follow-up questions to understand why this matters to them, and then maybe respectfully share what issue matters to you when you go to vote. And, it's totally fine if you, have conversations with people who disagree with you. But of course, if the conversation turns uncomfortable or kind of aggressive, you can definitely just thank them and leave. You don't have to stay in that conversation. And then you want to move to, when I think about voting, what matters most to me is whatever issue you want to say. It doesn't have to be climate change, but for me, that would be what I'd talk about. And say, that's why I think voting this year is so important. This is really key because a lot of people don't vote in the midterm elections, sometimes because they just don't really think it matters that much. But we want to make sure people know every person you're voting for has an impact. So then the next question is, are you planning to vote in the upcoming midterms? If they say yes, just skip on to right here, that's great. Do you have a plan to vote? You can vote on election day early or by mail. We'll keep going in a moment. But if they say, no, they're not planning to vote, you could say, can I ask why not? Maybe they don't think voting matters. Maybe they just don't know how to vote. And we have a couple, possible responses that you could say. I won't read them all here, but we totally understand that's where some people are at. We don't need to force someone to vote, but we do want to connect respectfully and share why it really does matter if they choose to change their mind. But then the final question is, do you have a plan to vote? Like I said, and here's where the handout really comes in handy, because you can say, we really encourage you to pledge to vote so we can follow up with you closer to election day. You can give them the handout. You can show them the voter pledge page, and then say, this page includes helpful voter information, links. You can also say, this is really key, because of redistricting this year, which happens every 10 years due to the census, you should check your voting location and who's on your ballot, because it might have changed. And then here are a couple, frequently asked questions. They might say, like, why should I preview my ballot? For me, that's super important because we want to research who's on the ballot and see where they stand on issues we care about. And why should I check my registration? Because whenever you move or change your name, you're going to need to update your voter registration. And then you just ask them if there's anything else that you can help with, and thank them for their time. And then down here, there are just some really quick door knocking tips. Smile and jump in right away. Don't make it partisan. Practice active listening, really trying to understand where they're coming from. Don't get discouraged if a lot of people are not answering the door or don't want to talk. Even if you only talk to a few people, that impact is going to potentially be huge. And remember, you're also leaving handouts at everyone's door. Do know the local voting rules and regulations. We've kind of gone over a few of them, but there are more questions down here that you can check out. And don't answer voting questions that you're not sure about. They can, call a number and find out. So then the other form that everyone's going to have on their clipboard is this report back form. I'm going to make it a little bigger. And they're only going to need to fill this out when they talk to someone. They don't have to fill it out every time they knock on a door. And then just down here, they write down the address, they write down some information from the call, and they move on. And hopefully by the end, you'll have an idea of how many total doors you knocked today. It doesn't have to be a perfect amount, just a guesstimate so that we can track our impact. And then the other two things I won't show you, but they're printed voter registration forms. It's better to register to vote online with the QR code, but if they would rather do it via paper, you'll have a couple forms and a couple absentee ballot request forms. The same thing, they can do that online, but if they'd rather do that on paper, that's fine. And then again, there's a couple ways to get these materials. The best option is just to request that we bring them to the door knock. You'll need to provide the optional materials, but we'll bring the rest. But if you want to do your own door knock, you don't want us to come, you want to provide your own materials, you can pick up the printed materials at our office, or you can actually request a gift card if you need help printing off materials and getting ready. And lastly, you can request printed materials to be mailed to you. You'll just need to give us, a couple weeks of warning so that there's time for it to arrive. And the last part of this toolkit is inviting people to come to this door knock. So the most important and effective way you can invite people is one-on-one. So thinking about individuals in your congregation, your community, etc., who would find this meaningful, who are wanting to make an impact this year. You could also ask your clergy people or other community leaders if they have ideas, maybe people who've talked to them and said, oh, I really am worried about this election. I really want to help. They could identify some key people. And of course, some talking points down here you can look at are pretty obvious, event details, why does this matter, making sure it's clear this is nonpartisan, and making it clear that it's going to be really fun. So you can also, share during worship or during gatherings. Here's some kind of verbal announcements you can use. And you can also write an announcement. We, again, have given you kind of an example here that you can adapt. So with that goes over our entire toolkit. So I'm going to scroll right up back to the top and remind you, the first step of any of this is just to let us know you're interested in doing a door knock. We're really committed to making this successful, fun, easy for you. And so we hope to hear from you soon, and we're excited to knock doors with you. Thanks so much. Bye.